Okay folks, welcome to episode 2. In this episode I'm going to cover off doing our pedals. So I've got the brake pedal here, there's the accelerator pedal, bolts on here, there's 3 bolts for this, and then there's another bunch of bolts that hold the entire assembly on the car. I'm going to keep the same switch that came with this one, just to make my life easier, but I will have a spare if I need it. So that's that. And then the other pedal that we've got to do is the clutch pedal. So there's the switch up here for which the wiring is already there, so we'll plug that in and we'll put our master cylinder in and mount the whole thing up. This bolt at the top, we'll work out how we're going to do it. It's a bit tight in there. This bolt is right up the top behind your instrument cluster, your wheel, everything. So some suggestions say remove it out, lots of extensions to get in there and do it up. I do have ratcheting spanners, so maybe I'll try that. We'll see how we go. But this one's going to be our troublesome one. Anyway, that's what we're covering in this episode. So let's get into it and see how we go with our next steps of our manual conversion. Alright, so a couple of notes, we're almost there. I've got the worst offender of a nut out, so that's this one, which on our pedal is this top right one here. So you'll find this one really difficult to get to. There is just enough room for you to get hands and tools and stuff in to get that out. I had the accelerator pedal removed at the time. Right, so you can see that's our accelerator. I've just bolted it onto here for the meantime, just so that, you know, I can start to have a look at that. So, a couple of things. First, pop the clips here and here that'll remove the cable here to get it all out of the way, so that you can get clearer access to here. And also your tooling will be a little tricky. So, to break the nut, I use my 3/4 with my step down adapter and a long 13mm 6-point. You don't want to go rounding off the edges of that nut. If you round off those edges, it's going to be way worse to get in there to get stuff out. I did have a look at removing the instrument cluster and surround to see if it would give me easier access. Vita says remove the entire steering column. I did not want to do that. But in the end, you've got this plastic here. Now, one other option, if you want to, is possibly drilling a hole through here so that you can get tools straight in at that nut. Again, I didn't want to do that either, so I worked with what I had. This was enough to get the initial break. I just took it easy, took my time, and just held a very uncomfortable angle to eventually get enough pressure to do it. I'd get about 2 clicks of movement, possibly 3, right, at a time to keep working it off. So, and you do have to work it all the way back. Eventually we get to the point where we can use our quarter drive, and I've got another 6-point short 13mm. So we can use that just by itself eventually, but also with the small quarter drive extension as well. It just has less play in it, and our ratcheting is a lot closer. There's a lot finer points on this, so we'd get more out of our turns with the quarter drive. If you can probably just extend your piece of pipe. I had to take the little plastic handles off because the studs for the accelerator pedal get in the way. So that's really the worst part of pulling the pedal assembly out. The rest of the nuts are actually quite easy to get at. It's just that one that's really difficult and in an awkward spot. Doing it back up will be the same problem. We'll only get about 2 turns per thing. You're just going to have to take your time if you don't want to go pulling everything else apart. So your call on what you decide to do, but I'm just going to take my time, just do it little bit by little bit and be happy with that. Okay, we got it out. This is the automatic brake pedal. Okay, so this is the hardest nut to get out, and then these two are the next two hardest because they're right in on the edge of the pedal, and you've got the bracket coming out for your accelerator pedal. So look, it's just tricky in there. It's tight. It gets easier the further you come down. This one here and then this one here are the two hardest to do with the car as far apart as I've got it. These are relatively easy. Even this one is relatively easy. You've got a fair bit of room in there. If you've got all sorts of different extensions, 3/8, quarter, make sure you use them. It'll just make your life easier if you adjust. Just be careful not to round off any of your nuts while you're trying to get them out. It's easier to do them with the accelerator pedal out. Yes, this nut is then a bit tricky to deal with in the car, but it's not too bad. I did undo it in the car, and so not too bad. Just take your time. So far, in terms of time, to strip the car and get it to this point, we're looking at about a day, and I'm not rushing anything. So that's with me mucking around looking for bits and pieces, stripping parts of the under the car to try and find out where those transmission cables go. So overall, give or take about a day if you're just taking your time to get to this point here where we've got all our pedals out, we've got the clutch hole open, and we're about to put our pedals back in. So it took about 2.5 hours of mucking around working out what to use tool wise to try and get the bolts on this bracket out. That was some of the worst of it, and also working out how to deal with this pin. So this is the pin that goes through the pedal and connects the brake booster to the pedal. Now I believe these are one use, so I'll try and order another one of these. Being that it stops the car, I would like it to work properly. To get this out, I struggled with this quite a bit. Get a big flat bladed screwdriver, and there's the edge of this white plastic piece. Then you've got the metal of the brake booster's arm, and then you've got the pedal. Between the metal of the brake booster arm and this white piece, put your big flat bladed screwdriver and lever it into your pedal, and this whole piece will just pop out, and then you'll get it out. That was the easiest way I found. I did try pushing the pin back out to try and get it. I just couldn't get leverage on it. It was way too hard. Even now it's quite hard to push in. So ultimately, yeah, just a big flat bladed screwdriver and lever her out using the pedal as sort of leverage to pop that one. And it popped out quite easy. But this was quite a challenge to work out, so that's probably a hot tip for when you get to it. It wasn't something I could find documentation on at the time. Anyway, I'm going to keep going, bolting the pedals in. So let's see how we go getting those all finished. All right, so we got the brake pedal and the accelerator pedal back in. I had to play around with all the different extensions and adapters I had to put the bolts back in. The 4 bolts that you've got on the brake pedal, I managed to do with a really long amount of extensions, and it'll come out next to your steering wheel about here. You can get at the bottom 4. The top 2 are still a pain to do. I used the I used the short socket for those with the short extension, So this is the 10mm that I was using. So this is the setup I was using for the top 2 bolts on the accelerator. Have a play around with all your extensions, all your adapters, to try and get the right length so that you can do it easily. So the next thing I'm going to do is bolt the clutch pedal in. So there's 4 bolts there, and up top. It's got like a quarter twist in to lock into the actual pedal, and it clips in here, so it's quite easy. We're just obviously setting it in there for now, because this is how we're going to have to put the pedal into the vehicle. I did give them a quick clean up and just get rid of any surface contaminants. Same with the brake pedal. There was a little bit of surface rust and stuff, so I just cleaned all that up because they'd been sitting for a while. And the other thing I did is I went and got the nuts out of my V50 out there, so that I can, because obviously the car doesn't come with them. They're an M8 nut. They've got like a locking piece in them, and they're slightly oval shaped, which is interesting. But you can get 4 of these off the brake pedal of a donor car if you've got one, or if you're using a donor car, then obviously you'll just use the nuts from there. So I'm going to go bolt the clutch in, and that will about round out our installation of our pedals. Okay, so before we install the clutch pedal, I actually remembered we've got to get a hold of the electrical connector. Now, what you're going to need is just a knife, and you'll get in there and slice it. Now, I'm actually able to get right in here with my hand, and this is the connector you want. It's taped to, there's a loom that runs across the firewall just below the holes here, where the clutch master will come out. And so you want to get a hold of this cable. You can see it's just got a cover on it, which will get off and we'll be able to plug in later. But we want to get that accessible before we put our clutch master in there, because as you can see, while we can reach in there, it's going to be very hard to cut off the top of the loom there once we put the clutch master in. So make sure you do that before you go putting your whole clutch pedal in, just to make your life a bit easier. All right, where there was 2 pedals, there's now 3. And I'll just go through a few of the learnings that I got from actually going through the process. So all the studs that were needed were there, and the electronic connectors are there for both on the engine side and the interior side. So both the connectors that you'll need should already be in your wiring loom. Now, in terms of the hole that I cut in the foam, I did cut that a little big. It turns out if you want something a bit more accurate, take this and trace around this outside on the foam and cut your hole to that. Just keep in mind that you do have to assemble it in the car if you're not pulling the steering column out. I didn't pull it out, so I don't know if it's possible to have your master cylinder and pedal assembled outside the car, but there is a special tool that Volvo have so that you can actually do it in the car where it is, and so I'm not sure if there's enough room when you've got this out of the way or not. So I did do it in the car. Now that was quite difficult, especially without the tool. I couldn't get multi-grips in. I ended up getting it to lock by hand when I twisted it in, but that's the problem you'll run into, is that when it starts, it's rotated a little off, and you've got to rotate it to lock it into the pedal. So that's in regards to getting the master cylinder and pedal in. Now there is a few different pedal types. Volvo only lists the one part number in Vita when I checked, and so you may be a little confused when you're sourcing parts for it. The part number is the same across all the vehicles for the T5s, but the main one that you'll see in the images appears to have a plastic pedal arm, which I have seen, of course, across the forums that is an actual option. The 2011 C30 that I've got actually has a metal pedal arm, but the return spring is at the bottom of the assembly, and the one that I've got here that's in, the return spring's at the top. Now I checked a few of the Ford Focus XR5 variants as well. Depending on the image that I saw, some of those had the return spring at the top. So it just appears like there's multiple variants, and it was whatever Ford had on hand at the time when they assembled the vehicle that it went in. It all assembles cleanly. Just be aware that you might run into it. The other thing is, it's quite easy to bend your bracket on the top when you're trying to get things in position. I ended up doing the top bolt first. You can actually, if your hand's small enough or arm's small enough, you can reach all the way through, and you can get your 13mm ratcheting socket in there and do it very slowly. I managed to do that. So that's how I did the top bolt. I put the top bolt on lightly first and then did the other three. The other three are very easy to do with just really long extensions. So that wasn't a problem, but that top one's very tight to get into with the steering column in the way. Again, you're probably going to have more access with the steering column out of the vehicle, but I didn't want to pull it out, so I persevered, and it is doable with it in there. A couple of the other things that I checked as well, the piping in the engine bay, there is a little rubber O-ring or grommet or little rubber seal that goes on the end of it. When you source your parts, make sure that is on the end where it goes into the master cylinder. Volvo show it in the disassembly instructions, but they do not list it as a separate part. I'll leave a link in below. OEM denied are supplying just that little bit, and I grabbed a couple of them just in case. So as I keep working through this series, we'll actually be checking that's correct and that's how it's supposed to be, but it does appear to be so just based on Volvo's drawings. So that's something else that I was checking. The AC lines in the engine bay don't get in the way. So I've got the electrical connector on, and I did that after I'd mounted the pedal. No issues. It was easy enough to do. And the suction hose and the clutch line between the master and the slave should have more than enough clearance with the angles and everything that are there to clear those AC lines and even connect them while it's connected. So we'll see if we run into trouble with that a bit later, but that appears to be okay as well. I did want to check that before we go further because of how difficult it is getting in here. If you are patient, it's not that bad. It's just a couple of those top bolts are really in a hard to reach spot, but once you get those on, it's overall not too bad. It did take me a while because I was researching and looking up a couple of other bits and pieces, but that's the end of this episode. So what we'll do next is, next episode we'll go through swapping over the or taking out the line that runs into the engine bay, and we'll swap that over with the manual one, and we'll put our manual gear shift assembly in. So we'll get all that swapped over in the next episode. If you're enjoying the series, just like and subscribe for me, that'd be great. And otherwise, we will see you all in the next video. Thank you.